Grim Reaper, Myths, Legends, and History. Written by KIV Books. Narrated by Tom Chandler. Introduction. Benjamin Franklin said, "There are two certain things in this life, taxes and death." While this may sound like any other famous quote, it is very true and practical. However, as certain as taxes may be, we will not focus on that in this book. Instead, let's explore this dark and distasteful topic that everyone prefers to avoid: death, represented as the Grim Reaper. According to scientists, death occurs in all living organisms at some point and is the complete end-of-life mechanism. Unfortunately, this definition isn't very descriptive. It doesn't describe how it feels to die. What will we go through? What can we expect to see? What are our options? Where are we going after death? To answer such questions, artists in the 14th century came up with the concept of the Grim Reaper to try and understand death better by giving it a face. This book will explore everything you need to know about the Grim Reaper, who people believe he is, and the myths surrounding his existence. By the time you finish reading, or in this case, listening to this audiobook, you will understand stories about his origin, what his image symbolizes, how he works, and the myths and legends associated with him. Let's dive right into it. Chapter 1. Understanding Human Mortality. Euripides said, "None of us can confidently say that we will still be alive tomorrow." Now, as sad as that quote sounds, it is the reality of our world. Death is one of the most certain things in life. We will all die, which makes most of us anxious. Instead of dwelling on the sad part, let's strive to understand how human mortality came into existence. How did human beings who were formed as immortal creatures stray from their happy state of perfection? The biblical account of Adam and Eve's sin is the perfect illustration. According to the book of Genesis, God created Adam and Eve to care for the universe and fill the earth. The Garden of Eden was a perfect place for the first woman and man to enjoy living. The plan was for Adam and Eve to live happily ever after without ever dying. God instructed Adam to tend to the gardens and pick fruit from any tree except one tree, the tree of knowledge of good and bad. Sadly, speaking via a snake, Satan duped Eve into eating the forbidden fruit. Eve's act of disobedience did not end with her. She proceeded to convince Adam to sin too by giving him the fruit. Instead of saying no, Adam proceeded to eat the fruit, knowing too well God had forbidden its consumption. When God discovered that Adam and Eve had disobeyed him and eaten the forbidden fruit, he felt angered. He declared that human beings would no longer be immortal. Instead, they would eventually die as a punishment for their disobedience. He also introduced other punishments like pain during childbirth and having to sweat and work hard to earn a living. This explains why most of us have to wake up early and go to work and pay bills, but let's not digress and instead focus on the death punishment. According to other religions, a man, at least in his initial creation, was a mortal being who attempted but failed to gain immortality. This story is in Gilgamesh's epic. Gilgamesh was the son of a goddess and a human monarch, but he was just like every other man in terms of morality. When his close friend Enkidu died, the mighty hero felt deeply troubled by his impending death and embarked on a quest for immortality. His quest led him to Utnapishtim, a person granted eternal life by the gods. Utnapishtim told Gilgamesh that if he could remain awake for a week, Utnapishtim would grant him immortality. Even though Gilgamesh finally fell asleep, Utnapishtim nonetheless gave him a plant that could revitalize its owner. Unfortunately, a ravenous snake consumed the plant while Gilgamesh was on his way home, ending Gilgamesh's hopes of becoming immortal. Gilgamesh returned home and accepted his fate as a mortal man. In these two stories, death comes off as an evil that man would do anything to escape. However, some philosophers insist that death is a necessary evil, and even though it is painful, it has its benefits. Death as a necessary evil. Even though death is painful, sad, and dreaded, it is a necessary evil. We might not realize it, but death helps us live a better life in one way or another. First, death balances our population. Can you imagine a scenario where people gave birth without anyone ever dying? That wouldn't work, would it? For a second, assume that humans continued to age, but our organs never shut down. To account for the now endless length of time we would live, the way we appear, feel, and think would have to change. Perhaps our faces wouldn't reveal our age as easily as they do now, or someone considered old in today's society would be considered young in this parallel universe. In any case, the population would grow, and we'd be under growing pressure to discover new ways to accommodate everyone. Additionally, if we didn't have the threat of death looming over us, would personal homes, dwellings, and safe havens be as important as they are today? After all, in this parallel universe, not having a home to reside in isn't going to cause your death, right? Necessities such as food, drink, and clothes would become scarce, since a world without death is, to say the least, unsustainable. Fresh food prices would soar owing to scarcity, and there would be less and less open land on which to grow food. Food production would be dominated by mass-produced, generic, and boring items, while our clothing and personal belongings would progressively become homogeneous and unremarkable. Undoubtedly, humanity would still have some wealth-based hierarchy of some type. However, the shallow, materialistic disparities between people would reduce, all to relieve the stresses of a society of so many people. From this hypothetical, it is evident that, without death, the planet Earth would be unable to sustain a growing population. Thus, it is necessary that, as a new generation comes to life, the old one retires and dies off to make way. Death also relieves the sick from their pain by ending their lives. While that may sound contradictory and somewhat impudent, it is a valid argument. Sometimes death is better than living in immense pain and suffering because of an illness. Death also brings people together at funerals because, sadly, most people will miss a wedding, but not a funeral. I am sure you have experienced situations where members of a family who had not seen each other for years come together because of a funeral. A son will fly home from abroad to attend a relative's funeral, yet he may have spent many years away without feeling the need to come home. So yes, death unites families, friends, and even neighbors, even though we often do it in the saddest manner possible. Lastly, death helps keep human beings motivated to live and do better while on Earth. Can you imagine if you were immortal and knew very well that you had unlimited time here on Earth? Would you still wake up early to go to work or chase your dreams? Would you even set deadlines to achieve your goals? Why do people say that they want to buy a house by the time they are 40 years old? Why not when they are 90? The reason is simple. They know that they might not live up to 90 years old, and even if they did, they would only enjoy their house for just a few years before dying. If we were immortal, I doubt if anyone would be motivated to achieve their goals. After all, we would have an eternity to buy a house, or car. Even though we can comprehend the pros and cons of death, no one in living history has managed to eliminate death by becoming immortal. For this reason, the concept of our extinction bothers us. Death is a permanent presence in our lives, casting its evil spell over everything we do. What happens to us when we die, and what occurs after our death, has bothered and worried humans for centuries. Since time immemorial, human beings could neither control nor stop death, but they could at least give it a face to make it more understandable. As a result, different societies created different figures to represent death. One of the most famous and outstanding death representations is the Grim Reaper. Many societies believe he is a skeletal figure covered in a black robe, and he comes carrying a scythe ready to reap human souls. The question now is, from where did this Grim Reaper image come? Let's find out in the next chapter. Chapter 2: The Origin and History of the Grim Reaper. Martha Sweeney Kilmore wrote, "You will definitely grow into a new person once you meet the Grim Reaper and deny him your soul." Martha's statement acknowledges her belief in the existence of the Grim Reaper and implies that he is not a regular character. That said, from where did the idea of the Grim Reaper originate? Various cultures have developed figures to depict death for centuries. The Grim Reaper, normally believed to be a skeletal figure draped in a dark hooded gown and wielding a scythe to reap the souls of humans, is one of the most prevalent and iconic. But how did this visual become connected with death, and when did it do so? During the 14th century, death prevailed throughout Europe as the Black Death ravaged the continent. The Black Death was the world's worst epidemic and is believed to be the outcome of the bubonic plague. Historical researchers believe the epidemic killed 1/3 of Europe's population, with some sections of the region suffering significantly more than others. The first plague outbreak happened between 1347 and 1351. To make matters worse, outbreaks recurred multiple times after that. To say that death was undoubtedly on the minds of the surviving Europeans would be an understatement, and it is hardly unexpected that they drew up an image to represent it. As a result, people from different cultures began creating different images to represent death, and that is when the hideous image of the Grim Reaper started taking shape. Unlike the hideous Grim Reaper we all know today, there are other, more pleasant versions. After all, if you're planning to give death a person's face, why not make death look nice? That was the approach used by the Greeks when they gave death the face of Thanatos, their version of the Grim Reaper. Thanatos was the twin brother to the god of sleep, famously known as Hypnos. Artists painted both gods as young, attractive men. For example, some artistic paintings depict Thanatos with wings and a smoldering flame. His role, or shall we say task, was to escort the deceased to Hades, the Greek afterlife. Thanatos would then convey the souls to Charon, the river Styx's ferryman. Death is pleasant and useful in this rendition, rather than ugly and scary. Other cultures gave death a more feminine face. The picture of the Grim Reaper depicted in the minds of northern Germans took on a feminine form. They depicted their representation of death to be the Valkyries, who were attractive young ladies. They served as Odin's messengers and as companions to the souls of soldiers killed in battle. They would mount on angelic horses into combat and choose courageous soldiers to die after assessing the battlefield. They would then send the souls to Valhalla, Odin's hall. The valiant souls were recruited to participate in the War of Ragnarok, a catastrophic clash signifying the end of their days after they arrived in the afterlife. These angels of death are similar to those who serve as spiritual mediators between God and humans. The belief is that such angels deliver messages to humans or guard them against danger, at least according to some myths. They engage with the dead in other tales, torturing people who have sinned. In many cultures, the angel of death is a spirit that removes one's soul from the body, causing death. There are also other types of angels, all serving different purposes. For example, angels Gabriel and Michael have mostly served as messengers of protection. Like every other religion, Muslims have their representation of death. His name is Azrael, and he takes the form of a terrifying spirit with eyeballs and mouths all over his body. The belief is that Azrael has a vast book in which he tracks and keeps a record of the births and deaths of all the world's souls. The origin of the Grim Reaper draws a lot of motivation from the fact that even science could not put a face to death. According to most scientists, death is the end-of-life mechanism that occurs in all living organisms at some point. Unfortunately, the definition isn't very descriptive, and it sheds no light on what happens when a person dies, except the shutting down of all body organs. However, by believing in the existence of the Grim Reaper, most people now have an assumption of what death looks like. Let's move on to the next chapter and learn a bit more about the legend of the Grim Reaper. Chapter 3. The Legend of the Grim Reaper. Robert Elton Harris wrote, "It does not matter whether you are the king or the street sweeper, but one day you will dance with the Grim Reaper." In this quote, Robert was trying to say that death, symbolized by the Grim Reaper, is a constant factor for everyone. Death will certainly come for you, no matter how rich or poor you are. Death is what equalizes every human being. It is what we all have in common, despite our race, background, age, social class, or economic status. Well, enough of the constant reminder that we will all die. I'm sure that you've had enough of this negativity and would rather focus on more interesting things like why the Grim Reaper ended up with such a horrifying image. Why is the Grim Reaper drawn to look scary and powerful? What is the legend of the Grim Reaper? Read on to find out. Before the 14th century epidemic we discussed earlier, most religions and societies only believed in the angel of death, not the Grim Reaper. However, death got a new face after the Black Death Plague, which caused millions of deaths in that century and the following centuries. As people continued to die, fear swept the entire continent. Fear of death, fear of an unknown plague, and the fear of the pain that came with the sickness. The disease was horrible, especially during its last stages, when the flesh on the victim's limbs became infested with maggots, leaving their skin looking black. This horrible picture became so ingrained in people's minds that it influenced the perception of authors, painters, and poets of the time. Most sick people died looking like skeletons, and people started having an ugly skeletal picture of death. This perception change was portrayed in drawings, paintings, and poems of the time, creating the image of the Grim Reaper. The Grim Reaper was generally represented with a dart, arrow, or similar weapons. The Reaper, a cutting tool with a long curved blade attached to a long shaft at an angle, eventually replaced these instruments. Death was seen as an ugly and arrogant being, wielding his scythe through a multitude of humanity, mowing down souls like grain. In some paintings, a young woman would occasionally stand by Death's side to symbolize the connection between death and life. After the Black Death, death became a dreaded thing, often thought to be God's retribution for sin. This devastating epidemic spread relentlessly from country to country, wreaking havoc on Europe. The Black Death left an unmistakable feeling of hopelessness and sadness in its wake. This sentiment showed itself in a variety of cultural and creative forms. At the time, creative expression reflected people's personal experiences with death. Because there was no convincing explanation for why the epidemic began its rapid ravaging of Europe's population, people started believing that death from the plague was the consequence of God's judgment and would lead to an afterlife full of pain. These beliefs were easy to come up with because it was a time of intense religion and superstitions. As people became more and more hopeless, they found ways of expressing their pain and frustrations in art. After all, there was little they could do. Their drawings enhanced the Grim Reaper's image to look more powerful and ruthless. While earlier drawings may have used lighter colors, artists now preferred to use black when drawing the Grim Reaper. Most artists probably felt that using black paint to draw the Grim Reaper would better illustrate how the Black Death had turned their lives upside down. Artists were very detailed in how they imagined and drew the Grim Reaper. Everything about his image had a deeper meaning, which shall be our focus in the next chapter. Chapter 4. Symbolism in the Appearance of the Grim Reaper. Randy Pausch says, "We cannot defeat the Grim Reaper because he will come for all of us. The only thing we can do is to live life to the fullest before he comes." Randy means that death is inevitable, and we can't do anything about that fact. However, instead of feeling powerless, we should recognize that we have power and control over life. We can utilize our time on Earth to the fullest so that even when our time to die comes, we will have no regrets. Randy's sentiments are beside the point. This chapter aims to help you understand what the Grim Reaper's appearance and persona symbolize, or is believed to symbolize. Everything about the Grim Reaper is said to have some significance. The weapon he is assumed to carry and his clothes are assumed to reveal something about his personality and ambitions. Let's look at some of the symbols one by one. The skeleton and the skull. Why was the Grim Reaper's face not drawn to represent a normal human being? In drawings, his face is a skull that barely has any flesh. His eye sockets are visible but presumably empty. He is also assumed to have no hair or skin. Well, artists designed the Grim Reaper's face to look that way because it is how we will all look when we die. Our flesh will decompose, and our beautiful hair will fall off. In the end, we will all look like the Grim Reaper. The Grim Reaper probably looks like a dead human being to symbolize his purpose: death. But he has no eyes but can still see where he is going, also symbolizes that he is probably a spirit who can neither be heard nor seen. As mentioned earlier, the Grim Reaper's current image developed during the Black Death. Thus, the skeleton and skull drawn in most paintings were symbolic of what was going on then. It was typical to observe heaps of rotting bodies as the epidemic raged over Europe and Asia. 1 in every 5 London residents died during the Great Plague of London between 1665 and 1666. Understandably so, artists and illustrators began showing death as a corpse or skeleton because death and dying are an intrinsic part of daily life. The skeleton figure signifies the decomposition of earthly flesh, which is what remains after maggots and worms devour a human body. It also enforces the greatest fear that human beings already have, the fear of being destroyed beyond recognition. The Grim Reaper's black coat. Death and mourning have had a long connection with the color black. Most people attended funerals dressed in black, and we usually transport the dead in black hearses. In most cases, we associate the color black with evil forces. The Reaper's black coat is meant to add to his mystique and horror. We all have deep fears of the unknown, which is what the Grim Reaper's alleged black cloak enforces. Some people believe that he hides in the darkness of his cloak and comes like a thief when we least expect it. The black color could also be a symbol of the Black Death. Many considered death from the epidemic black and dull because it came with so much pain and suffering. While no death will ever look glamorous, there are less painful ways to die. For instance, it is better to die peacefully in your sleep than to die from a plague or a fire. Therefore, 14th century artists were more exposed to painful and disheartening deaths than peaceful deaths. For that reason, the representation of death to them had to be a dark and unappealing figure. The Reaper's Scythe. People from earlier centuries, before the Black Death, believed that the Grim Reaper came holding arrows, spears, daggers, or bows. The belief was that these were the tools he used to kill people. A scythe eventually replaced these other tools. A scythe was an instrument for reaping grain or cutting grass. A harvest during the fall indicated the death of one year and the beginning of another year, symbolizing the natural continuation of the agrarian civilization. Thus, death is seen as a way of harvesting souls for their passage into the hereafter, just as farmers harvest their crops after they are fully grown. The fact that death was associated with agricultural seasons symbolized that it was a compulsory rite of passage. Just as seasons have to end, so does human life. Therefore, it is impossible to live forever, and one has to die to cross into the next stage. Sadly, the next life for humans is not as certain as agricultural seasons are. Farmers know exactly what to expect in the next agricultural year, but humans have no idea what awaits them after death. While there may be stories of how life after death is, they are just that, stories. None of these stories are proven beyond a reasonable doubt. Do you know why? Because no one has ever died and come back to tell us how life after death is. I guess we will all cross that bridge when we get there. The classic hourglass. Some societies believe that the Grim Reaper comes holding an hourglass to represent the passage of time. The traditional hourglass we all know about has 2 glass bulbs filled with sand that take a whole hour to flow from the top to the bottom bulb. Some artists have drawn the Grim Reaper carrying such an hourglass to imply that he carries a message of the end of a person's time on Earth. The Grim Reaper's gender. Even though there are societies that believed in the existence of female Grim Reapers, most societies believed in a male Grim Reaper. Others believed in a Grim Reaper who had no gender. Societies that believed in the existence of a male Grim Reaper did so because they believed men were stronger. Since death was seen as a powerful occurrence, it had to have a male face to represent it. On the other hand, societies that believed in a genderless Grim Reaper did so because they felt death could only have a spirit's face, not a regular human being. Some artists came up with an image of the Grim Reaper based on what they read in the Bible. Some of these readings come from the book of Revelation in the Christian Bible, where 4 horsemen appear, ushering in calamities that foreshadow the end times. Disease, war, starvation, and death are the 4 horsemen. The god of death in the Bible comes riding a pale green horse, the color of sickness and death. He also comes in a black cloak, enclosing a smirking skull and a scythe poised for the gruesome task ahead. Artists use such readings to enhance their image of the Grim Reaper. Let us move to the next chapter and look at some common myths about the Grim Reaper. Chapter 5. Famous Myths about the Grim Reaper. Patrick Carman says, "The Grim Reaper doesn't disappear, he catches up." Death is a constant factor in the human race, but people from different cultures all have different interpretations of the Grim Reaper. These interpretations draw influence from the different beliefs that each society has. This chapter will explore myths from different societies and see how death is represented differently from one culture to another. Scottish representation of death. In Scotland, the god of death is represented as a huge green dog. These green dogs were rumored to have the ability to seize souls and transport them to the next life. When they hunted, they were reported to be silent except for 3 horrifying and ear-piercing barks. If you were not in a safe area, such as inside your home, you would be so fear-stricken that you would die by the time they finished barking, the epitome of being terrified to death. Thus, the Scots believed that a person could be terrified to death. Please note that the Scots didn't believe that the huge green dog killed anyone via biting. Instead, it used its screams to terrify people to death. How true is that? No one knows, which is why it is just a myth. Greek myths about the Grim Reaper. The Greeks had their version of the Grim Reaper, whom they named Thanatos. Unlike the regular Grim Reaper that most people in modern society have in mind, he was the god of a peaceful death. The Greeks portrayed him as either an elderly man or a small boy with a sweet disposition. He was a good person, and he was Hypnos', the god of sleep, twin brother. On the other hand, the Greeks also believed in the god of a painful and horrible death named Keres. They were female gods seen as sisters to Thanatos. His main role was to take the spirits of the dead to Charon, who would then convey them to the afterlife. The belief was that any soul that did not pay Charon, the ferryman, could not travel to the afterlife and would instead remain at the riverbank for centuries. Thus, the Greeks did not see Thanatos as wicked. They considered him unavoidable. The Greeks linked Keres to battle, sickness, accidents, and murder fatalities. The sisters were commonly depicted as malevolent, sucking on the lifeblood of the corpse after the spirit was transported to Hades. They'd be armed with teeth and talons and were clothed in gruesome apparel. Irish myths about the Grim Reaper. In Ireland, there was a species of creatures called Dullahan. This creature's head was supposed to have enormous eyes and a grin that could touch the head's ears and whose head was curled under his or her arm. The Dullahan would come riding a black horse or a wagon drawn by black ponies and stop at the home of someone who was going to die, calling their name, and the victim would die instantly. The Dullahan disliked people watching them, and many believed that if they realized someone was observing them, they would hit the person's eyes with a whip created from vertebrae or toss a bucket of blood on them, an indication that the individual would die next. Scandinavian myths about the Grim Reaper. Norse mythology embodied death in the form of Hel, the queen of death and ruler of the realm, where she collected the souls of people after they died. During the Black Death, death was sometimes represented as an older woman called Pesta, who always dressed in a black hoodie. She'd enter a town with a rake or a sweeping broom in her hand. Some individuals would escape the plague if she carried the rake. However, when she carried the sweeping broom, everyone would die. Scandinavians eventually adopted the traditional Grim Reaper, who wears a black robe and holds a scythe. Hindu myths about the Grim Reaper. In most Hindu myths, the Grim Reaper's name is Yamaraja, which refers to the god of death. He rides a dark-colored buffalo and wields a rope sling that he uses to transport the soul back to Naraka, his home. Although some think there is just one Reaper who camouflages himself as a tiny child, there are many types of Reapers. The Yamadutas, servants of the Grim Reaper, transport souls back to Naraka. The Grim Reaper stores all the details of a person's good and evil activities in Naraka. Following the belief in reincarnation, the proportion of these deeds permits Yamaraja to select where the soul must stay in its next existence. People whose records are full of good deeds ascend to Svarga Loka, while those full of evil deeds descend to Naraka. The Mahabharata also references Yama as a famous philosopher and follower of the ultimate Brahman. According to Hindu beliefs, justice prevails equally to everybody, living or dead, depending on karma or destiny. Therefore, most people believe that their actions and deeds on earth will determine their destiny in the afterlife. Whether the myths are true or false, they greatly influence how Hindus relate to one another. They heavily believe in karma and, as a result, strive not to harm their fellow human beings. Chinese myths about the Grim Reaper. In the Chinese culture, the Grim Reaper is known as Yanluo, the god of mortality and the lord of hell or the afterlife. Yanluo originated in Hinduism and was incorporated into the Chinese religion before spreading to Japan. He is usually represented in traditional Chinese garments and a Chinese prosecutor's hat. By wearing the judge's cap, the Grim Reaper serves as a symbol of justice. Most people believe that, after our deaths, we will await Judgment Day, where anyone will receive rewards per their actions on earth. Like modern-day judges, the innocent will be set free, while the guilty ones will be held captive as they await their punishment. Japanese mystical version of the Grim Reaper. The female underworld ruler is the Japanese equivalent of the Grim Reaper. The Japanese describe her as a severe and ruthless administrator in the service of the great king, who, when the time comes, guides all good and evil from the human world to the underworld. In Japanese legend, after giving birth to the fire god, the goddess Izanami dies from the fire wounds and reaches the underworld, a place the gods depart to, and to which her spouse Izanagi traveled in an unsuccessful attempt to salvage her. Izanagi refused to salvage his wife after noticing that his wife was no longer as attractive as she once was. After that heartbreaking dispute, she tells him that she will take 1,000 lives each day, establishing her status as the goddess of death. This means the Japanese goddess of death kills people as revenge for what Izanagi, her lover, did to her. Notably, the Japanese culture is one of the few cultures that see the Grim Reaper as female. Sadly, the Grim Reaper in their case is an angry and vengeful female, which probably means that life after death could be full of torture and suffering as punishment. Islamic myths about the Grim Reaper. The Angel of Death, also known as Azrael, is the name given to the Grim Reaper in Islamic texts. Allah dispatched him to gather mud from the soil so that he could create Adam. This was after Michael and Gabriel, the other two angelic beings, had failed to accomplish this simple task. The world had sought refuge in Allah, and the two angels failed to accomplish their given task. On the other hand, Azrael was vigilant when it came to accomplishing the tasks Allah gave him, which is why Allah gave him the role of the Grim Reaper. From all these different myths, it is clear that most cultures associate the Grim Reaper with death and assume he is the angel of death. Even though he may have different faces and names in different cultures, his role remains constant across different cultures to facilitate death. However, why do some people claim to have seen or dreamt with the Grim Reaper but did not die? Let's find out in the next chapter. Chapter 6. Interpreting Dreams with the Grim Reaper. Jack Kerouac said, "The Grim Reaper is not evil, he is a lifesaver." People usually become curious about the alleged existence of the Grim Reaper after seeing him in a dream. As terrifying as such dreams can be, Jack Kerouac believes that the Grim Reaper is not some evil character who only comes to end our lives. Instead, he claims that the Reaper appears to us in dreams to save our lives by transforming our minds and perspectives. Dreaming of a visitation from the Grim Reaper might significantly impact the dreamer's life. It makes you wonder if this signals that your time has finally come to transcend to the other realm. However, you might be astonished to learn that this dream has nothing to do with your death. Rather, according to dream interpreters, it highlights what's going on in your life and what you can do to improve yourself. Dreaming of the angel of death brings your fears and worries to the surface. It raises awareness of issues that affect your wellness, family, friendships, and work. For this reason, this chapter will address various dreams that people have had with the Grim Reaper and their alleged meanings. Seeing a silent Grim Reaper in a dream. Some people claim to have seen the Grim Reaper in their dream. However, he was silent and did not say a word. This can be scary because he neither delivers a message nor a warning. However, dream interpreters claim that the dream indicates an inability to see the future as vividly as you would like. Negative energy has most likely infiltrated your life and caused you to lose concentration. It's also possible that somebody close to you is intentionally deceiving you, meaning it is time to review your relationships and see who could be lying to you. A dream of the Grim Reaper talking. This dream allegedly represents the troubles, fears, and uncertainties that will befall you. You're concerned about your prospects. This dream is believed to serve as a reminder to focus on the issues you can control and accept the ones you can't. This dream is a constant reminder to plant seeds of prosperity and peace today for a better tomorrow. For example, if the Grim Reaper appears talking about your job or marriage, it shows that those are the two issues that bother you the most. Therefore, you must focus on the aspects of your work and marriage that you can control and accept what you cannot change. In addition, if you dream of having a candid conversation with the Grim Reaper, it means you've gathered the strength to admit that something is wrong in your life. You've finally realized that you'll remain stuck in suffering and discomfort for the rest of your life unless you address the source of your anxieties. Convincing the Grim Reaper to spare you in a dream. If you dream of bargaining with or bribing the angel of death and he spares your life, many people believe this means you will conquer your obstacles. This dream informs you that the difficulties you're facing will not be the end of you. Rather, they encourage you to delve deeper into the secret stores of your abilities and capabilities. Therefore, the next time you dream of pleading with the Grim Reaper not to kill you, do not wake up and start thinking you are about to die. According to dream interpreters, this dream is a motivation sent to you so that you do not give up after facing a few life obstacles. Instead, keep pushing, because those obstacles are only temporary. Receiving advice from the Grim Reaper. Some people have had dreams of the Grim Reaper advising them on matters related to their lives. While this may sound like a good dream, dream interpreters insist it is not. The embodiment of death cannot possibly be kind. Be wary if you have such a dream, because it is a warning sign that you may fall into a trap. Someone has devised a massive plot to steal your hard-earned cash and other valuables. Alternatively, someone could be planning a big strategy to deprive you of your health insurance, wages, and savings. Some people claim to have such a dream before being defrauded of everything they own. Probably, someone is trying to convince you to put your money in a questionable investment and you feel conflicted or in a dilemma. If you have this dream at such times, it is a warning that you should not dare to make such investments because the person is scheming to steal from you. Kissing the Grim Reaper in a dream. You're probably wondering, why would anyone want to kiss the Grim Reaper, even if it is just in a dream? Well, allegedly, such a dream has a deeper meaning. It shows that you're willing to do whatever it takes to make your dreams a reality. You are willing to give up your conveniences for your loved ones and their future, and are even willing to work in faraway, isolated locations if it means getting closer to achieving your goals. Such a dream should encourage you to take advantage of your determination to achieve your dreams and aspirations. This dream is simply a compliment that you have what it takes to achieve the goals you've set for yourself. a dream of your partner kissing the Grim Reaper. If you've ever had such a dream, your first thought was probably that your partner was cheating on you. Well, calm down, because that is not what this weird dream symbolizes. Apparently, this dream means your romantic partner is suffering from health problems. You must show them support and love, and even if they have not confided in you yet, assist them in finding a long-term solution to their illness by being proactive. You may need to go out of your way by making financial resources, time, and other necessities available to them. Your partner's life is at a crossroads right now, and you may have to cancel some of your commitments to give your partner the time they deserve. The Grim Reaper visits your workplace in a dream. This dream means you're preoccupied with your career's health and success. Indeed, you're so focused on your professional achievements that you've forgotten about your personal and social obligations. This dream advises you to be less concerned because there is more to life than career and business achievements. Take time off from work and engage in a hobby you love. Take days off and spend time with your family, friends, and kids. The Grim Reaper is simply trying to remind you that there is more to life than what you are so focused on. After all, once you're on your deathbed, you'll be more concerned about the human connections you made rather than the professional achievements you attained. Fighting the Grim Reaper in a dream. This dream symbolizes your readiness to face your problems without fear. You will better understand the depths of your talents and capabilities by doing so. The dream might also imply that being constructively motivated means you can overcome hatred and antagonism. It is a clear indicator that you have a strong mind and a strong belief that you can win or get out of any tough situation. Simply put, you have already won all your battles in your mind. This dream is a good sign to encourage you to keep manifesting positivity into your life. Even though things may look tough right now, your positive thoughts and attitude indicate that you will conquer everything. Coming home to find the Grim Reaper in your house. This dream indicates that you have little respect for people's boundaries. Look around you and see if someone has ever complained about your intrusiveness. People dislike your meddling behavior in their lives, even if you aren't aware of it. As a result, you may have alienated several friends. This dream means you need to let go of some of your control. You must start to respect the privacy of others. Remember, being intrusive does not mean physically intruding on someone's private home. It could also mean that you try to control the people around you by imposing your opinions on their lives. The Grim Reaper is simply trying to tell you that you should be more gracious with people. Understand that not everyone reasons like you, and that everyone has the right to live their lives as they please. Dream about facing the Grim Reaper and remaining bold. When you think of having a dream of the Grim Reaper, you probably think of terror and fear. So, what does it mean when you see the Grim Reaper in a dream and you are not terrified? Well, according to dream interpreters, it is a sign that you are a fighter who overcomes every life challenge. As such, it's a good omen if you had a dream about seeing the angel of death and not being terrified of him. It's usually a sign that you've overcome your challenges. It is a symbol of success and prosperity. Therefore, if you've been going through a lot and you have such a dream, it should encourage you to keep fighting. It means that you are strong enough to handle whatever is happening in your life. Dream of being terrified by the Grim Reaper. If you had a dream about seeing the Grim Reaper and being terrified, it was probably a sign of stagnation. It's most likely a hint that your triumph will be stalled or some of your initiatives will fail. While this may look like a bad omen, it is all about your perspective. Probably, this dream is meant to help you reassess your goals and initiatives to see if they are actually good for you. While giving up is always seen as a sign of weakness, it is sometimes healthy. For example, giving up on toxic relationships is healthy. Therefore, if you are at a place in your life where you feel like you are forcing issues and you have this dream, it is probably a sign that you should step back and reassess. Dream of waiting for the Grim Reaper. Some people claim to have had dreams of them sitting, waiting for the Grim Reaper to arrive. As weird as this dream sounds, dream interpreters insist that it is a good omen. It implies that your assertiveness and courage have paid off in some of your business ventures. Perhaps this dream represents being committed to succeeding in some pursuit and eventually succeeding. Therefore, if you've been longing for a certain breakthrough, this dream could symbolize that your time is here. Some people have claimed to have had this dream just before their greatest career breakthroughs. It could mean that you are about to get that promotion you have been working towards. This dream means that your hard work and determination have finally paid off. Dream of the Grim Reaper bringing you death. What does it mean to see the Grim Reaper in a dream coming for your life? Well, according to dream experts, a dream in which you see the Grim Reaper coming and you are aware that it will kill you is a red flag. This dream means you have been welcoming so much negativity into your mind, heart, and life. Probably you have been a pessimist in every situation that life throws at you. As a result, your dreams, joy, energy, and morale are slowly dying. However, all is not lost. This dream serves as a wake-up call to help you switch from negativity to positivity. You must try to think more positively and stop stressing about some things, or else you end up attracting negative outcomes. This dream represents some of your concerns and warns you that if you don't get rid of them, they will emerge in your life. It is all about the power of attraction. You attract what you constantly think of. If you think and expect positive things, positivity will manifest in your life. Unfortunately, the reverse is also true. Dream of you becoming the Grim Reaper. This dream has a similar meaning to where you come home and find the Grim Reaper waiting for you. It's probably a sign of your intrusive personality. You may have a proclivity for interfering in the lives of those closest to you, such as your spouse or relatives. These people are bothered by your proclivities, and you may find yourself in a scenario where they begin to avoid you in order to avoid your controlling behavior. Therefore, if you've noticed people close to you avoiding you, and you have this dream, it could be a sign that you need to respect people's boundaries. Based on the interpretations of all these dreams, you probably now understand why some people believe that the Grim Reaper is a lifesaver who uses these dreams to correct and guide people in the right direction. As much as the Grim Reaper's main role is to facilitate death, he also appears in dreams to make sure that we live to the fullest while we still have time. Besides dreams, where else is the Grim Reaper's image used in today's society? Read on to find out. Chapter 7. The Concept of the Grim Reaper in Today's Society. When the Grim Reaper finally comes, no words can save you. Dixie Lyle. The belief in the strength and mighty nature of the Grim Reaper has been evident throughout the centuries. While you may think that he is a belief of the past, there are still people who believe in his existence even today. This is evident in the many works of art assigning the Grim Reaper different characters. Let's look at various instances today where the Grim Reaper appears in today's society through artwork. The Grim Reaper in modern movies. The movie Dead Like Me, released in 2003, shows that people still believe in the Grim Reaper in today's society. In the movie, the Grim Reaper is assigned the duty of harvesting souls from those destined for pain. To make the movie even more intriguing, the Grim Reaper character chosen is female and not male, as many people would expect. The chosen characters end up dying a painful and horrific death. Moreover, the female Grim Reaper is a young 18-year-old girl who is moody and irrational, just like her fellow teenagers. She also has to find an apartment and a job to support herself after moving from her parents' house. With all the personal problems the girl is facing, it is interesting to watch how she handles her role as the Grim Reaper. Reaper is another great movie featuring the Angel of Death, famously known as the Grim Reaper. It was released in 2007, which is not too long ago. Losers may have several poor explanations for their failures in life. However, having your soul and destiny sold to Satan by your father and mother can suffocate any desire to succeed. This is Sam's predicament in Reaper. Determined to save his father's life, his parents gave up his soul before he was born. In short, they promised to give their firstborn child to the Grim Reaper. However, they intended to have no children to defeat the Grim Reaper. But the Grim Reaper brought in his chips in the form of a doctor who deceived Sam's parents and told them that they were infertile. They were duped into conceiving Sam to keep their promise to the Grim Reaper. Because of their guilt, Sam's parents let Sam take shortcuts. For example, he was not forced to join college and was allowed to settle for less in life. To save himself, the Reaper gives Sam a task: capture a soul in a vessel and deliver it to him, or else he perishes. The Grim Reaper in video games. Video game makers are no strangers to the concept of the Grim Reaper. He has appeared in various games, none more noteworthy than Tim Schafer's Grim Fandango. Manuel Calavera, who comes from the land of the dead and is the tour operator at the Department of Dying, stars in this thrilling game. He is the story's Grim Reaper, and his mission is to guide newly arrived souls to the next world. The Department of Defense gives the best care to ethical souls who did good things while alive. They are led to their new life on the train labeled 9, which delivers them wherever they need to go in just 4 seconds. On the other hand, sinners must walk for 4 years to reach their destination. Manny falls in love with Mercedes Colomar, a recently deceased woman who was duped out of her number 9 ticket and left without a choice but to make her final trip on foot. Grim Fandango combines numerous afterlife ideas with a humor-filled plot full of unique characters delivered in a cinematic style. This is one of the most classic games, as it has a unique perspective of the Grim Reaper. Conker's Bad Fur Day is another video game that features the Grim Reaper. Playing this game about a squirrel who wakes up in a strange world after a long night of excessive drinking calls to mind many things about the Reaper. Conker's Bad Fur Day does not look serious at first, throwing everything it wants at you to provide laughter and quirkiness. Conker is not immortal in the game. If you don't play your cards right, you die. You then emerge in a dark realm, only to be welcomed by an awful voice belonging to Little Grim Reaper called Greg. His irritable demeanor and whiny voice help explain how lives function, and you'll remember him for the rest of the game. Dante's Inferno is one of the most famous works of epic poetry you may have heard of. The poem depicts a man's journey through hell's 9 levels to save his girlfriend, and it contains a lot of unpleasant imagery. It was just a matter of time until video game makers saw it and decided to make it into a game. Though many components remain the same, the game makers applied for additional rights to make the game more action-packed. In this game, you begin life as a corpse, and when the Grim Reaper arrives to take your life, you choose to fight back. Even though it is instructional, this incarnation of death has a terrifying voice, a remarkable appearance, and a noteworthy personality. 1986 saw the launch of an NES video game, where players followed Simon Belmont on his mission to fight Dracula. Simon must make his way into Dracula's castle with the armies of demons under his leadership. He is armed only with whips and the player's endurance to face aggravating obstacles. He battles various formidable foes, but none compare to death, who serves as the ultimate boss. Since then, the Grim Reaper has been a recurring character in the Castlevania series, both as a difficult boss and Dracula's most powerful ally. Because of its third-party compatibility, the PlayStation 2 has one of the largest game libraries. While some video games were unremarkable, a few were admirable even though they received little publicity. This is the case with Maximo, a game about a courageous knight who fights enemies while gaining amazing skills from his undergarments. In addition, one of Maximo's most distinguishing features is that he is friends with the Grim Reaper. In the follow-up, as you begin as an NPC and begin to gain the ability to harness Grim's power, Maximo can switch places with Grim, who is quicker, tougher, and untouchable, but only if you gather enough power. Cartoons featuring the Grim Reaper. The Grim Adventures of Billy and Mandy is an exemplary cartoon series released in 2001 featuring the Grim Reaper. While messing with Billy's hamster, Mr. Snuggles, Goofy Billy and Snobby Mandy meet the Grim Reaper. The children protest when the Grim Reaper tries to take Mr. Snuggles away. Grim, who has a Jamaican accent, introduces a game of challenges. Grim's arrangement is a limbo game. If he wins, the hamster is his. However, if he loses, the hamster will live, and Grim will continue to be Billy and Mandy's best friend for the rest of their lives. Grim delves to unimaginable depths to reach under the limbo pole, but Mandy alerts the hamster, who attacks Grim's head, forcing him to lose the game. For the next 7 years of Billy and Mandy's eternal childhood, the Grim Reaper shows up to bring suspense and drama to this thrilling cartoon series. The Grim Reaper featured in a few Treehouse of Horror episodes, either as a side plot or as the main protagonist. In one episode, Simpson gives his life for a donut and is carried to Hades by a demon version of Ned Flanders. They then agree to take the matter to an afterlife court, where a clothed skeleton serves as the prosecutor. In another scene, the Grim Reaper comes by to claim Bart's soul, but Simpson bashes his skull against the wall, killing him and rendering everyone in the world immortal. He puts on the Reaper's robe, and his arm immediately becomes a skeleton, and with a scythe and a manuscript in his hands, he becomes the new Grim Reaper. Additionally, the Reaper appears in several regular show episodes as a recurrent character. He has a skeleton-like zombie figure with a thin body and greenish-white skin flaps. Thick skin flaps separate his mandibular from his jawbone, which Rigby famously likened to a shredded Parmesan, giving the appearance of a mustache and sideburns. He also has hollow eye sockets and dark brown shoulder-length hair, and his outfit in this cartoon is British biker gear. He's dressed in a tattered hoodie, a black motorbike jacket, and a gray turtleneck. His shirt and jacket barely hide his ribcage. His right arm is extremely muscular, something noticeable when he takes off his jacket. The Reaper in this show is a being who seeks to cause havoc and harvest souls. He certainly is a creepy-looking Grim Reaper who cheats his way to acquire what he desires. Another cartoon that features the Grim Reaper is Family Guy. Interestingly, the reader from this show is a spoiled mama's boy and an obnoxious turd. His entire purpose is to harvest souls, but he moans and whines about not having an ass and being unable to find a date. In some ways, this image of death resembles a rebellious adolescent who, in all honesty, isn't a threat to anybody. Nevertheless, notwithstanding his bemoaning, he shows up when he ought to and does his job properly, despite upsetting others. Therefore, if you're looking for a more pitiful version of the angel of death who lives with his mother and is asthmatic, Family Guy has you covered. Grim Reaper tattoos. Even though the Grim Reaper's image typically represents death, tattoo artists have a broader interpretation. Apparently, a tattoo of the Grim Reaper can be a symbol of bravery, good luck, fragility, or even a dark time. Simply put, people get Grim Reaper tattoos to represent whatever they want. The Grim Reaper's tattoo can signify the cycle of life, indicating that you recognize that life and death are inevitable events that we will all encounter. It can also symbolize strength and courage, indicating that you are not frightened to die or face your religion. As a result, this tattoo is common among soldiers. The Grim Reaper's tattoo is also prevalent in the goth subculture, where some people enjoy having fierce-looking ink, regardless of its symbolic implications. From all this, it is evident that the belief in the existence of the Grim Reaper lives on today, especially in the tattoo world. Apart from movies, cartoon series, and video games, the Grim Reaper features and appears in many other art pieces. This includes songs, poems, and stage plays. This character is presented in different versions depending on every artist's beliefs, creativity, and perception. Nevertheless, it is evident through artwork that some people in today's society still believe in the existence of the Grim Reaper. That said, are there real-life situations that reinforce the Grim Reaper's concept? Let's move on to the next chapter and answer that. Chapter 8. Real-life serial killer associated with the Grim Reaper. Anthony Liccione says, "The Grim Reaper is not dead. He is living among us, visiting the young and the old." While the Grim Reaper is an imaginary representation of death, Anthony Liccione strongly believes that the Reaper is alive and lives among us. For that reason, this chapter shall focus on a real-life serial killer thought to be as lethal as our imaginary Grim Reaper. Lonnie D. Franklin, the Grim Sleeper. Mr. Franklin was found guilty of the killings of 9 women and 1 adolescent girl between 1985 and 2007. He was nicknamed the Grim Sleeper because of the extended pauses between his murders. He appeared to quit in 1988 and then resumed in 2002. This name was first given to him by Christine Pelisek, a journalist who worked for the LA Weekly in 2007. The journalist could not let the case go, as she noticed incidences of black women being killed without any arrests. She compiled a list of these women and wrote a story about it. As the story attracted attention, the police department had no choice but to create a task force to solve those murders, which led them to Franklin. Franklin killed some of the women by shooting them and strangled others. According to the investigators, Mr. Franklin was linked to the victims by DNA or ballistics evidence. Investigators won the case after obtaining a DNA sample of his son, Christopher Franklin, who they arrested in 2008 on an allegation of carrying a gun. The DNA led the investigators to his father, who was linked to the murder investigation. To obtain Mr. Franklin's DNA, a detective disguised himself as a pizza busboy and collected a slice of pizza that Franklin had partially consumed. Normally, Franklin would snatch his prey from the streets, choosing people who would not be on the police radar. Some of the women he targeted were sex workers, while others struggled with drug addiction. He killed women from similar neighborhoods. Many people question the authorities in the Grim Sleeper case, claiming that Franklin would not have managed to commit all those murders if his victims had been white. However, the LA Police Department denied these assertions, claiming that at the time of Franklin's murder, the force lacked funds, had few employees, and lacked the modern forensic techniques that they have now, all of which contributed to Franklin's conviction. Surprisingly, the Grim Sleeper did not look like a serial killer. According to his neighbors, he was a calm, friendly man who often repaired vehicles outside his garage. He looked like any other upright citizen, which is probably why the police never suspected him. The Grim Sleeper seems to have enjoyed taking the lives of innocent women because he even kept their photos as trophies. The police ransacked Franklin's home after his arrest in 2010, and approximately 1,000 images of women and adolescent girls, some nude, unresponsive, bleeding, and apparently dead, were taken into evidence. After profiling the known victims, detectives began questioning if the Grim Sleeper was responsible for any further murders. One of the photographs was in Nitro, Washington, who was thought to be the killer's sole survivor. The killer offered Ms. Washington a lift in 1988 and proceeded to shoot her after she got inside the car. He then sexually abused and threw her off in the streets to die. Luckily, she survived the ordeal and lived to testify against her abuser. Serial killers are known to take intervals between crimes, but a 14-year gap did not seem realistic in Franklin's situation. Thus, he is suspected of having committed many more murders during that period where he had allegedly stopped. Franklin was also suspected of killing Thomas Steele, a companion of one of Franklin's victims, and anywhere between 14 and 100 other unexplained Jane Doe killings. Franklin maintained his innocence throughout the legal procedures until DNA was used to link him to the murders. It is almost by luck that the investigators managed to crack the case, because if they had not arrested Franklin's son, they would never have connected his DNA to the murders. This shows how this serial killer had been discreet in all his killings. The police apprehended Mr. Franklin in 2010 at his residence in South Los Angeles, not far from where the victims' corpses had been discovered. The police claimed he was a former sanitation worker and garage assistant for the Los Angeles Police Department. That he was once an employee in the police department probably helped make him look upright and unsuspicious for all those years. After his apprehension and trial, the court sentenced the grim sleeper to death. However, he died while on death row, awaiting his execution. The authorities claimed to have found him dead in his cell. It is not clear what killed him, but autopsy reports did not indicate any signs of trauma. Therefore, the assumption is that he died a natural death. Even today, the police still believe that this killer had murdered more victims. Unfortunately, even after his conviction, he refused to speak to the authorities, and he died with all his secrets. The case of Franklin the Grim Sleeper makes people question their beliefs about the existence of the Grim Reaper. Even though we cannot say that Franklin was indeed the Grim Reaper, his actions come close to that of our imaginary Grim Reaper. Conclusion. I hope that this book has provided you with information you wanted to learn about the Grim Reaper. Having covered where this concept originated, myths surrounding the Reaper's existence, and more, you now have some basic understanding about him. Never stop learning, researching, and expanding your knowledge. Good luck. You have been listening to Grim Reaper, Myths, Legends, and History. Written by KIV Books. Narrated by Tom Chandler. This audiobook is production copyright 2023, KIV Books. All rights reserved.